Garth the Worm Wyckoff. He called you the voice of skimboarding.
I struggled to find the right words, if I'm being completely honest, because if anyone has like the ability to pass that title, it's the Worm. The pressure is on the announcer
Right.
to keep things moving, and that shifted my mindset entirely. The biggest governing body for wave riding sports in the world is the ISA, the International Surfing Association. You can have globally ranked riders that could have a ranking and see where they would get seated in and be able to slot in and ride against riders, from anywhere in the world at any time. Being able to take a board sport away from the coasts and bring it anywhere in the world really, I think, takes it to another level. When I was like 20 years old, I knew I wasn't going to go pro. I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't just drift away. Thanks to everybody over at Skim USA. You run the best contest in the world. Everybody over at the UST and anybody who's ever welcomed me onto a couch or picked me up from the airport. You guys are the best.
Hey everyone, this is Trey Lee with the Skim Steezy Podcast. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest. So we have someone who, when you go to Skim events, it's not necessarily the first person you think of, but I think nonetheless plays a very critical role in overall making the experience, really lively, very energetic. Who I'm talking about today is an announcer of skimboarding that's been in the game for I don't even know how long we'll get into it, but ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the UST and Skim USA announcer, Brett Mahon.
What's going on? Hey, Trey.
Yeah, I like the signs. Yeah, how's it
Hats off
going?
to all the Skim Steezy people out there
Yeah, man.
living large,
Thanks.
some of the best threads in the business.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and yeah, shout out and thanks so much for coming on. And I know you're super busy. I see you're in your little girl's room right now, so you may be catching her in a nap or something. But
Yeah, right.
or
All she
she's
wants to do is
away
run
somewhere
around.
else.
When
Yeah.
I was in California announcing at the Vic. Shout out to Victoria Skimboards and the most historical skim event in the world. And while we were there, she turned 9 months old, and pretty much ever since she was like had her feet in the sand, she just wanted to run around out there. And since we've gotten back, that's all she's wanted to do. So the past 2 weeks, I've just been chasing her around the house. It's been a blast. She's feeling inspired, watching everybody skim on the shores at Aliso Beach. Comes home and she's like, I just want to run around. So
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it's so about. Like, just the events themselves, it's like an infectious energy. You get there, and it's like you're guaranteed to have a good day just by being there. And,
yeah,
seeing all the crazy riders, especially today, and we'll definitely get into it, of just the whole game has just evolved, right? And,
yeah.
just what you guys are doing with announcing, but also like the skimboarders, of course, themselves, and there's just the whole community.
There's something about that essence of being there. You're right. That energy is infectious. And as a young rider, I remember very vividly being, 13, 14, 15 years old. And one, you step on the beach and your heroes are right there. That's the beauty of the skim contest. It's the beauty of skimming in general is that, I don't have to paddle out to chase you down. You're not
Mm,
behind a velvet rope at a big half pipe. Like we're sharing the beach. They're very approachable. You can go up to any of your favorite pro riders and tap them on the shoulder and they'll, bend their ear and they'll be happy to chat with you, which is really cool. And I've been blessed to be going to skim contests since like 1999. So it has been a pretty long haul. But yeah, to that point, I think the energy that's there for anybody who skims with a handful of friends, you travel with those same friends to a skim contest, and I feel like you get like a year's, a, like you upgrade your skills by like a year in 3 days because you see what's possible. You see how different people are approaching the same waves, and you've seen conditions like that before, and your mind goes one place, and then you're watching someone else you've never seen skim before do it a whole different way, and then you go back home and you go back to your home break, and you just see waves completely differently. So I love a skim contest like more than anything. I got mad respect for the people who go out and just free skim and they're not a part of the contest scene, but from someone who was a young rider and found that that energy at those weekends, like I think it's invaluable. It's pretty cool. So I'm very happy to be a part of it. Like thanks to Skim USA and to the UST for doing what they do, and we'll circle back a lot, I'm sure, to being very grateful for all the effort that those people put in because it's unbelievable.
yeah, totally. Like so much effort, so many different aspects of what makes skimboarding so cool. Um, and you mentioned just briefly like you started skimming back in 1999, and I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about your journey? You're in New Jersey right now, right?
Yeah, so I've kind of joked. I call myself like part of the 50 Mile Club because I grew up about 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia in the New Jersey, like South Jersey suburbs of Philadelphia. So I'm easily 45 minutes from the nearest beach, which would be Atlantic City, which I have some friends who are from there who might argue, but there's not a lot of skim waves in Atlantic City. There's just very few actual waves the closest beaches to me. So for me, I'm driving pretty much an hour and a half to get to the nearest wave, which I'll be doing tomorrow. So like I'll run down to Cape
Wow,
May, I'll drive up
it's a
to Point
mission.
Pleasant. Yeah, Seabright. Shout out to the Seabright Skim Bash,
Oh yeah,
19th annual. We've been doing this event for 19 years. Next year will be our 20th. That's about an hour and a half. So, it's a pretty good hike for me to get out to the beach. But yeah, I was 10, so this is 1996. And there's a little surf shop down in Wildwood, New Jersey. It's still there. It's called Kona. And I remember my dad, we were down in Cape May. It's kind of where he grew up, spending time at the shore. And we walk into this surf shop, and there's a skimboard on a rack. And he's like, "Oh, I remember these. Like I used to skim when I was a kid." And he picks it up, and it's a Victoria Woody, and it's got that classic, as classic gets, Victoria design. The paint streak that runs down the center with the
hmm
Victoria
hmm
Woody with the silhouette of the guy. It's like Beaker doing a rap, or Hendy, or I think maybe.
Oh, that's old school. I think I've seen some wooden like tables around Laguna that have that the
Oh yeah,
old school. Yeah,
yeah. I shouldn't mess that up. I know who it is, but I'd have to look at it to see who the silhouette is. I want to say it's Hendy, but yeah, and he's looking at the skimboard, and it just I could see it in his eyes of him like cycling back to being on the beach as a kid my age and having all this fun. And then he flips it over, and on the back, I don't know if they still do this. Normally, you'll see the stats of the board, the length, the width, and a little write up about the board manufacturer. Well, back in the day, there was a lot of photos of the team riders all over it, and they sold VHS tapes, they sold pads. There was like a little brochure on the back, and one photo I remember vividly is Bill Bryan. It was an LS&S ad at the time where he's like upside down on a wave that's like already pitching. And my
oh my
dad's looking at
gosh.
it. He's like, "How are these the same thing?" Like he's holding this wooden board, and he's looking at the back, and he's like, "How? What is? These are the same thing? Like his looks like it's made out of like resin." And
Right.
sure enough, he went online. This is like barely had the internet, and actually no, he called the shop. He called Victoria Skimboards and said, "Hey, I just got a wooden board for my son. I'd like to order a board." And he ordered a 1 inch thick, extra large. It had to be like 62 inches long. It was literally something that Blair would surf on. And it's huge
Yeah.
carbon double wrapped epoxy board, two VHS tapes. We got the bomb and aftermath, and a couple skim mags. And then, sure enough, like not even 2 years later, we were going down to the East Coast Skimboarding Championships in Dewey. We'd hop on the ferry and take the ferry across to Delaware, and that's where I met what I consider to be many of my dearest friends to this day. Got to meet J Dub and H Dub and a lot of the East Coast skim rats, and all the guys from Cali would be coming out. So I got to see Beaker and Geo in person, and Pickle, and like the whole scene was out. So yeah,
Sick.
as like a 12, 13-year-old kid, that was pretty unbelievable.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you just said so much there. I think just what stands out to me is that you just sort of like soak up all of these different experiences, and then like skimboarding is as basically just it's helped to draw you in the culture, and not only just the sport but the community itself. And that's something I even resonate with, just like off rip, and like you were saying, like there's no like red tape with the between you and the riders. And I just found the community so open, so much more engaging, so much more fun than going to some of the surf events that I've been to. Like skim events, it's just like it's a different energy altogether.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up playing a lot of sports, like many of us. I think everybody out there can identify with having a hobby, whether it's bird watching or golf or playing volleyball or like surfing or skimboarding, whatever it is, people, you want to have a hobby in your life that you can connect with. And I still to this day remember sitting in like seventh grade homeroom holding a skim mag in front of me and just thinking to myself, this is the coolest hobby on the planet. There's
Right.
like everyone's thinking about, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a mechanical engineer. And I'm thinking, why would you not want to be a professional board athlete? Like that's the dream. You get to travel.
Right.
Your office is Tahiti. It's Hawaii. It's if you're a snowboarder, you're going to Switzerland and like all the coolest places in the world. You make pretty good money. You do what you love. It's exciting. And to me, skimboarding with how dynamic it was, because in an hour on the sand, you can chase down 50 waves. And every
Right.
time you get on the board, you're immediately introduced with all the high end dynamic turns and airs that you'd want to do in every other board sport. And you can just turn around and lap it again. Like you can ride two waves in the same set. You cannot do that on a
Yeah.
surfboard.
That's one of the
So
things I was telling my buddies. It's just, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, no, that's kind of it. It's just it's fast, it's dynamic, and then when you go to these contests and you can see it in person, it's mind blowing because it's right in front of you. And then yeah, like you said, it's welcoming. The families that are
Hmm.
there are welcoming. The the energy on the beach is welcoming when you hear the announcer, and we'll talk about this, but when you hear the announcer, I grew up listening to Joe Bonk, and he's bringing the energy. You feel it. It's visceral feeling, and it's connected to something that's directly in front of you. I'm not watching it in the air 500 feet away where you have to pay $500 for a VIP access to get anywhere close. Like it's right in front of you, you know?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Um. And yeah. I mean, I think that's so great. And you mentioned some of the other skimboarding announcer, and I was also thinking of uh, Garth the Worm Wyckoff, and yeah,
Oh, what a
and I remember when at the Vic this year during the award ceremony, he called you the voice of skimboarding. So I'm wondering, what exactly does that? I mean, it's quite an honor. So like, what does that mean to you? Um, and yeah, can you maybe explain like what your relationship with the worm is?
I I I struggle to find the right words if I'm being completely honest because if anyone has like the ability to pass that title, it's the Worm. I mean, he's as big of a legend as there ever has been on a microphone in any like arena, let alone with skimboarding. We're pretty blessed as a community. The Vic's been going on for 46 years. The East Coast Championship's been going on for 41. And we've had Bonk on the mic for 27 years and Garth on the mic out here on the West Coast representing the greatest skimboarding event in our history for, like the same amount of time. It's unbelievable. It's hard for me to really put my head in a place where that title feels deserved. I know I've done a good bit of contests, but I'll say this. I came out to the Vic for my first event. I like kind of haphazardly hitchhiked my way out to the Vic, and I showed up at the beach Friday morning. No, I'm sorry, not Friday. I got into town Friday morning. I showed up to the beach Saturday morning, and Tex is setting up scaffolding, and there's like Jeff Gomez in the water, Paul Wade in the water, um, um, Conley Ware, oddly enough, is getting some waves, and I went out and I skimmed with these guys. And one of the first people else I saw on the beach, not in the water, was Garth. And the worm shows up, and I kind of went over, and I didn't like tap him on the shoulder or anything, but we were just kind of standing by each other, and he said, "Hey, are you Brett Mahon?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I read your write up of the Southside Shootout this year. It was really good." And I was like, I can't believe anybody read that. Like
Is
I
that a skim event, real quick, just for the
it
audience?
was a skim event. Yeah, it's a Delaware skim event that Jason Wilson and Alley Oop Skimboarding put together in the early
Hmm.
2000s. And it was a UST stop for a long period of time in like mid June. And yeah, I announced the contest, and I was asked by the UST by Aaron Pelusa to do a little write up for the UST. So I wrote it up. We put it on the website. It was like shared on the Skim Online message boards. I didn't think if 100 people read it, I would have been surprised. Funny story. I went back and read it like after Garth had mentioned that a couple years later, it was full of spelling errors and grammatical
Right,
errors. They
right.
were put on sentences. It was awful. The fact that Garth had anything nice to say about it at all was like very gracious of him. But yeah, and he said, do you want to jump on the mic with me later? And I said, sure. I didn't have any expectations to do it. I just wanted. It was my first Vic. I'd never been out there before. Never been to Laguna before. And he invited me on the mic, and I thought we had a really, really good connection pretty much immediately. And we did Oktoberfest that year as well. I went up to Newport, and I was sitting having a taco somewhere and a beer, and in works the worm. It was the Friday night right before the Balboa contest, and he walks in and he like sees me, and I had a notebook out, and in the notebook had like the results of the UST at that time and what the storylines were of who could move up, who could go down, who had the possibility of taking the tour. And I remember him mentioning something on the mic about it, about being prepared, and I just thought it was really cool. So I think I've got like an immense respect for the worm, because there's things that I think he does that I think come so naturally to him that I can't even wrap my head around ever being able to do them. The voices and the energy and the way he kind of draws the lines over what he's seeing is very unique. But I'm very grateful for any compliments that come from a man of his stature, because it's a lot. He's cool. He does a lot for the sport. So I don't know about the voice of skimboarding, but
Right.
you know, we'll see.
But yeah, I mean,
We'll
there's
see.
a reason
I
why
got
I
a lot
have
of
you
years to
on
go
right
to get
now.
there.
So yeah. So you hit on a bunch of stuff there, and I think the two things that I want to talk about from that are, um, in your eyes, what makes a good or great skimboarding announcer? And then you mentioned a little bit about preparation and how you were complimented on that. So tell us, like, how do you get prepared as well?
Yeah, I mean, this has been for me at least like a very trial and error kind of learning experience for me. Um, I'll send it back to one other person who said I was going to be the voice of skimboarding, and that was the first guy to ask me to like officially announce some contests, and that was Skim City Greg. He ran the Pit Surf Shop in OBX and in Florida, and just a tremendous guy. Like, inspired me a lot. He was always an unapologetic runner of contests. He just kept things like moving, but at the same time, he had a huge place in his heart for skimboarding. And I think he had a positive effect on dang near everyone that was close to him. Like, he's just an awesome guy. So love you, Greg. He called me, and in 2010 gave me the opportunity to say, hey, um, Bonk wants to kind of step back from doing a lot of these contests, and I think you'd be a good candidate to step in if you're interested, and I'd like you to be the voice of Skim USA or something like that, like something along those lines. And it kind of took me aback. I didn't know what to think of that at the time, but sure enough, got tossed in, and at the time we were kind of just winging it. I'm telling stories of the pro riders, what they like to eat, where they like to hang out,
Right.
which guys like to take their shoes off on the plane,
Yeah,
trying
that's
to
funny.
give a
Giving them
little
little
behind,
backstories, right?
little backstories, because these guys are all approachable guys and men and women, and they're awesome to spend time with. So why not take the opportunity to talk about it? And at the same time, the level of riding was really turning a corner, because at that time, like, the three shove was the pinnacle of flatland tech. And at that point, everyone had gotten into doing it. It had spread its way down. You see the pros start with it first, and then it gets to like the men's, and then the junior men's, and the boys division. In that period of time where it travels from the pros to the boys division or the girls division is like, that's when a trick is becoming like
It's
ubiquitous with
saturated,
level.
right?
Yeah, at
Uh,
that time, like, there was only a handful of guys that were doing three shoves even, and then it started going into like front three shoves and switch shove-its, and like it really started popping off. I feel like at that time. So I spent the whole first season kind of just talking about the tech and breaking down the difficulty of what people are watching. And the next year, Greg pulled me aside and said, "Listen, these events. The most important thing about these events is that they keep going. Like, you have to have riders ready to get up here to get the jersey on. We have to have judges ready to get up here and switch out. We have to keep everyone needs to be alert of the time. If this event goes late and we run into a thunderstorm and we can't finish, he's like, we've never not finished in 40 years, just so you know. So the pressure is on the announcer
right.
to keep things moving. And that shifted my mindset entirely. And from there, the structure for me every time I get on the mic is, number one, like, bring up the riders. Two, let them know, and all the people on the beach know, who they are, where they're from, any information I have about them, how much time's left, and then try and keep them plugged in to what's going on, and then sprinkle a little bit of that finesse in there if I have time, and then keep the event moving. So any event that finishes like on time, it keeps me in a happy place. To for Harry Wilson and for Skim City Greg, they would have appreciated that. So
Awesome.
that's a
Yeah.
shout out to you guys.
So, yeah. Yeah. Being prepared is so important, and getting all the facts for the riders straight, and I imagine just like keeping an eye on the time as well, and just making sure everything is going smoothly. It just sort of like plays into how much you actually are responsible for. Like you're not just an announcer, right? But you're more of like a master of ceremonies, like an MC, right? And you're sort of conducting and just from what you can do, trying to move things along.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back because there's a lot of people at all these events who put in a lot of work, like a lot of work that we don't see. And yeah, we have migrated to using live heats, so there's like algorithms that assist us now with doing some of the judging. But I remember going to contests for 20 years where the Edmondsons, Amber and Brian would flat up be crunching numbers all weekend, like all weekend, taking in sheets, red ink, marking off scores, circling, top five for each judge, circling them, doing the averages, and just like meant it's just a calculus exam for 2 straight days. It doesn't end. So you never see them because they can never get to leave the contest.
Right.
You know,
Human
we've got
calculators.
got
Yeah.
head judges that don't leave the scaffolding. You know, like Frank at the Vic and Melissa Stevenson for a lot of the Skim USA events. They don't leave the scaffolding all day. Like if they're lucky to get a bathroom break. So there's people that work hard, but yeah, as the MC, like you said, you're kind of in charge of a lot. You end up keeping track of. Um, I can't tell you the amount of time kids come up to me and be like, "Hey, what color am I?" And I'm like, "Guys, I'm sorry, but you're red. I've mentioned it 3 times, and I think they just want to confirm because they've heard it, but they want to make sure they don't get it wrong. That's fine. Put it in the middle of 36 hours of announcing over 2 days. It's like, you guys got to come prepared. I came prepared. You guys got to come prepared. Know what color you are. You shouldn't have to ask me. But yeah, right down to the color they're in, how much time's left. There was a period of time where we were letting the riders know, the MCs were letting the riders know what results they needed in that moment. So if it's easier when it's like a rider on rider heat. If it's a man on man heat, like Blair and Lucas in the final, Lucas needs a 7.4. And I went through a good growth period where we were sharing that information. I thought that was very valuable to have, but it eventually handcuffed the MCs a little bit because there's so much going on. There's no more room for that finesse. There's no room to talk about backstories. There's no room to talk about anything else. You're just talking about the results in the moment.
Really?
And yeah, it can be kind of cumbersome, and it's a lot of numbers, and I can imagine that being a bad experience for people on the beach because you're just hearing sixes and sevens getting thrown out every few seconds. Um, and we've started to implement different strategies to get that information to the riders without it coming from the MC in
Right.
particular.
So like
Uh,
coaching.
Having a coach on the beach, I think, is a great interpretation of that rule for the Skim USA, because every rider, one rider gets one coach, and props to all the towns that we host these skim contests in because the beaches have gotten a lot bigger. Now it's like
Right.
an
The sections. Yeah.
amphitheater. Yeah, we're getting football fields worth of beach, which is unbelievable. I remember going to the East Coast Skimboarding Championships. We'd have like 50 feet, and there's no room. Everyone would skim right out of the contest, or you'd lose them. But now you got this big contest area. There's the priority judge, which sits in the front, calls who's got priority, and then you got anywhere from 2 to 4 riders and 2 to 4 coaches, and you only got 10 people in that football field of an area, and that's pretty cool. The judges can see everybody clearly. Your coach can tell you how much time's left, what you need. If you just did a trick that you're very proud of and you want to know if the judges liked it or not, you can ask them, hey, what did they give me? You can even break it down to say which judge gave me which score, because that's where we've always wanted to take this, which is
Clarity.
complete clarity, accountability, transparency. I've been fortunate to be in the skim scene long enough that if I look up at the judges panel and I know who's up there, I know which tricks are going to impress which judges. And I think that's a level of
Wow.
preparedness these riders deserve to have. And we're now capable of giving that transparency to them. You know?
Right. Yeah. So there's so many ways I can take that. You just said so much. But I think
I have
I
it
think
a little.
that what I want to talk about is sort of the evolution of the format of competitions. And you're in a unique position because you've experienced a lot of different formulas of people just trying to optimize over time. You mentioned some of the big changes, like in generally in coaching, for example, the widening of the sections.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit more about other aspects of the competition format that have changed over time, and then do you see like a convergence of like, if we're going to take this thing global or something, like what are some of the better formats that you've seen?
Sure. Um, well, I think it goes a long way to see the number of West Coast and East Coast riders that are like cross pollinating to go to contests on either side. At the Vic this year, there's a lot of kids that are in the boys, junior men's divisions, the minis divisions that are coming from the East Coast. At that age, you know, I look at someone like Colton Etwine, who's a remarkable talent, and he and his family actually moved out from Florida to Laguna Beach to be a part of where the waves are, the mecca of the sport. But there's a lot of kids that also travel from the West Coast to the East Coast, and they love how the formats are run. And any Skim USA event that you go to, how uniform they are, how organized they are, what the expectations are that you can be aware of going into that event beforehand, and how like transparent everything is. The people behind the scenes at Skim USA, Toby West, executive director, John DePersig, Wendy Caputo, Melissa Stevenson, like Amanda Pace, Jason Wilson, all the different individual contest directors, Victor Enriquez. Like, there's so many people, and I know I'm missing a few, but there's so many people who put in countless hours throughout the year who think about these things and not only have very official, you know, board meetings where they're taking roll and they're logging the minutes and they're laying out what they're discussing in advance, and then they're talking about how that impact is going to affect the individual riders and how they can take that information and then put it on Instagram, put it on YouTube, so that the riders can do their research and get prepared in the off season. So when they show up and say, "Hey, we're going to implement a coaching system," right? It might be the first time that you've heard it, but they're going to talk about it at the riders meeting. They're going to be available if anyone has questions. They'll put a post up on Instagram that details it, and then over the course of the year, they're going to continue to reiterate it until it becomes second nature. And I watched that happen with live heats, with live scoring and live results. I watched that happen with the priority system, where kids went from taking 25 waves a heat, like with four riders in an 8-minute heat and five judges. Trying to watch a kid go 23 different times is like, how do you judge that? My head is spinning. So the priority system, one, it has really cut down on interference calls. It's really, I think, given the strength to the riders to be patient and find the waves that they like and put a game plan together of what maneuvers they want to do and when they want to land it, and be a little more careful with quality over quantity. And it's taken 2 or 3 years, but I think that's really helped. So the product as a spectator when you're watching it has gotten a little better. It's like there's more of a break. I can process what's happening. When you give it the eye test, you kind of know where kids are falling without even having to track it on live feeds, because you can see who's got the skills, who's landing stuff consistently. When it used to be a free for all of 100 waves written every 8 minutes, you could never really tell. You're just waiting for the results to go up on the board later. But yeah, to your point, um, their goal, which I think is a good one, is to eventually, one, unify the riders. In most other sports, there is like a unifying body that ties all the riders together, whether it's lacrosse or chess or whatever. Like, you pay a $5 membership fee and you're part of a United States governed agency of riders, or of athletes. I think that's a good place to start because it puts power on the athletes themselves. And then from there, the biggest governing body for wave riding sports in the world is the ISA, the International Surfing Association. And they have a branch of bodyboarding, and they have a branch of stand-up paddleboarding, and they have a branch of other hybrid sports that aren't surfing exclusive. And I think that's a great place for us to be setting our sights on, because they could take what something like Skim USA has done, which is create a contest that's very fair, very repeatable, very organized from riders 8 and under all the way up to 50 and over, including professional riders who are very happy to come out and have set pro purses in advance, set scheduled number of enrollments. Like you're going to have up to 36 competitors enter at a time. You know exactly how many rounds you have to go through. The seating is all choreographed. All those things make an event better for the athletes so they can be more prepared when they come in. And if someone like the ISA was to take it and say, hey, we want to do what you're doing here in the United States and do it with the European leg and take some of the same formatting and branch that across. We can do it on the Asian tour, we can do it in Australia. I think that's a pretty cool place to set our sights on, because then you can have globally ranked riders that could, in theory, be competing in Portugal in March and April, and then come right over and get plugged into the Zap World Championships in Dewey Beach and have a ranking and see where they would get seated in and be able to slot in and ride against riders, from anywhere in the world at any time. And, when I talk to if you look at the UST top 10 right now, one of the most like empowering things I see on it is the number of international riders that are in that top 10 right now. I mean, you've got Lucas Fink, Yahir Valencia, Gerardo Valencia, Bruno Sa, Leo Fritas, Elian Juarez. I mean, like a lot of those guys we wouldn't have seen 5 or 10 years ago. And now they're fighting to develop some attention. It was like some very well earned attention in their parts of the world too. So to have something like they do at Skim USA, it's very organized and move it around, I think is great. And I don't want to talk at too much length, but big ups to David Hafley and everything and all the people that have held that position at the UST. Because I know Paolo has, and Steve Taylor, and Aaron Peluso, and Tex Haynes, and a lot of the different people who have contributed to what UST has done shouldn't be overlooked. But I think they are at their best and they get the best compliments when they are also as organized, like as the Skim USA. The joint events between Skim USA and the UST are very empowering to me for both, because I think the UST has always had maybe better conditions and it's a more professional grade, like target, I guess. There's typically more pro riders, bigger events around the world. They've done events in Sononga and Cabo and, the Vic and Balboa. So they do big tour spots with a lot of pro turnout. But I think they're at their best when they take some of what the formatting of what Skim USA has done and implement it. So competitive skimboarding's never been in a better place in the history of competitive skimboarding. Like, it's better now than it ever has been. So we have a lot to be
But there's
grateful for.
also things that we can improve as well. So it's
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little bit of both.
And I was having a conversation with David, at the UST right after the Vic, and I said, it wouldn't be a bad idea. We should take a little spreadsheet of things we wanted to accomplish this year. Did we accomplish them? Yes or no? Check off those boxes. What would we like to accomplish next year? Yes and no. And we should even break it down by event stop. So are we doing the things that we want to do at each event stop? Maybe it's something like increasing the pro purse, right? The Outer Banks Skim contest this year, which is a joint UST Skim USA event, pro purse was $15,000. No, 15.5. It was big. That's a sizable. That's where we need to be going. If that is a goal that we want to have, the Seabright Skim Bash, we don't have nearly as many pros that come out. We did $4,000 this year. I think that's pretty huge because there's not as many pros fighting for the same amount of cash. It's pretty cool. But if you want to have it as a goal, you have to jot it down somewhere and then say, are we getting closer to our goal every year? And luckily, everybody that's plugged into the contest scene is doing that. So it's paying off.
I really like what Clay is doing, and I like supporting Premier Skim, and I want to see more, diversification in the competitions too, because that's also what it takes, right? It's like, okay, you run your experiment over here, okay, like how are you doing with our prize purses over there, and then we can sit at a table and talk about, okay, what's good for the sport, what's working, what's not working, and that's what I really like what you were saying too, and I think in particular that point that you hit on about just like kind of uh, sort of meshing in with the international surf um, organization,
Yeah,
and
the ISA, yeah.
right, the ISA. Sorry, yeah.
Hmm.
I was blanking for a second. Yeah, and I think that's really worthwhile. But I think when a lot of people hear that, they just see like a very far target, and I'm
Right.
wondering what kind of like piecemeal steps do you have in order to get there? Like you mentioned, writing down goals, things like that. But like, what sort of milestones would pave that path?
Between you and me, and I've had this thought for a long time, but every time I bring it up, it just doesn't travel very far because it's easy to get sucked back up into the tour of, you know, 10 stops on Skim USA and 6 stops on the UST and world champs, like all these different things. But I think if we added a Flatland leg to the domestic skimboarding world, like competition world, like when Flatland was big in Canada and guys were going up to Oregon and guys like Brandon Roth and Morgan Just were traveling to these Flatland contests where they were doing PVC rails in like ponds. Think about it what you will, but that broadens the horizons of what skimboarding is capable of. Like, there's no doubt that watching guys flatland skim in urban settings downstairs and in fountains in front of office buildings isn't progressive. Like, that is progressive. That is really, really cool, you
Yeah,
know?
so cool.
And when you look at other board sports and how they've taken off, skateboarding was incredibly cool and everyone had respect for it when they were skating in Southern California pools, but not everybody has access to a pool. It wasn't until it took to the streets and you could skate in California and you can skate in Kentucky and both be accomplishing the same feats that it really became a global powerhouse.
Right.
Being able to take a board sport away from the coasts and bring it anywhere in the world really, I think, takes it to another level.
Yeah, well, it
That's just me.
democratizes it. Yeah, it makes it more
Yeah.
accessible. And Adrian, I hope you're listening. His ears are probably lighting up right now. Adrian Russell, for the audience, one of the
Yeah.
pioneers or the pioneer of urban skim, flatland skimboarding, and writing tricks and different features, and even skim parks nowadays. Like that's a big movement. Is skim parks.
Yeah.
Is totally up in line with what you're saying, Brett. So I think that is
I
a
agree.
really good way. Yeah, that's a big
Yeah,
milestone.
if we had that, I think that's like the secret sauce because it's got the biggest room for improvement, the biggest room for growth, and I know that there's kids out there like Adrian Raza who have the skills that we might not have known about until they have to start self promoting. He's got to go out there and influence on his own. You know, he's got to do his Instagram and his YouTube videos on. If he had a bigger platform like a competitive tour or organized events, whatever it might be, like the thing that Red Bull's doing with so many different events, pop up tournaments and pop up big, games of skate or big air contests, that kind of thing. Like the more we have of that, the better. And there's so much room for all these things to happen. So no reason to have to feel confined. I would just the more the better. Um, but yeah, I that would be so cool. I'd be so happy to see a Flatland Skim League take off. And also props to Premier Skim League because like Clay Powell's awesome. That's a great example of it. There's so much to learn from the rootsy part of our community and how people feel at these events. And you know, I don't want to talk about judging for too long because I think everybody's got opinions on judging about whether it's getting better or worse. I'll tell you right now, it's getting better. Like it's always getting better.
Hmm.
But judging by definition is subjective. People should be entitled to their opinions. That's why it's important that we see people riding in a lot of different conditions with a lot of different styles so that you can build that subjectivity. And there's no wrong answer when you watch someone
Right.
do a 5 shove out to a wrap. If it doesn't get you excited, it doesn't have to. That's why we have 5 judges on the scaffold, why we average things out. Like, you're entitled to your opinion as long as you can justify your opinion because everyone feels differently about different things. That's okay. Is it difficult? Like, undoubtedly. How that scores for you is completely up to you, you know? But the more you see people do it and the more you see just how hard it is, if it's not something that you've ever done before and you can't really comprehend how hard that is, then you need to see it a lot and see people falling and see people like doing it with style more and more to really appreciate how that's done. So, yeah, the more access we have to it, the better.
Cool, awesome, man. Um, I think those are some pretty good milestones that you mentioned there. And speaking of milestones, take us back to November 30th, 2020, 2022, and
Yeah.
tell us, you know, what that experience was like. The birth of your daughter is
Yeah, my
that
baby
date
girl
for the
Claire.
audience, and how that has impacted your life, your skimboarding life, and your projections like into the future.
It's hard to put into words, really, because it just starts happening. It's this very visceral thing, parenthood, where things that you've seen thousands of times, you're all of a sudden seeing in a completely new lens, you know? Um, I remember talking, like, the award ceremony for me, announcing an award ceremony always gets me a little choked up because I've, you'd think it gets easier after time goes on. You've done so many of them, but like I get sad leaving. Like this is so many of these people are like family to me. They're some of my deepest friends, and to only get to see them for like 2 days at a time, like saddens me. But now I see it with my daughter Claire, and like I can't wait to see her grow up and hopefully want to be a part of this too, and to be able to experience it like as a skim dad, you know. And now I'm just seeing the kids riders like that I'm so jealous that vibe that they have. Like I can't wait to have some of it. Of rooting on your kid out in the heat and watching them, just progress and get better, or just the smiles that get put on their faces when they get a sticker from a pro. Um, but I mean, it changes everything. It changes like literally when I cross the street, I feel different about it. Like safety feels different. Driving over the speed limit feels different. Like everything feels different. What I eat feels different and tastes different. Um, but it all for the better. It untaps this realm of you that you didn't even know was there. It just gets like created for you. It's like you unlock a
Another
special
dimension,
key. There's another
the
dimension.
daddy dimension. Yeah,
The daddy dimension.
yeah.
She's a cute kid. I mean, I'm really blessed. My wife Ashley and I, we couldn't have asked for, a happier little kid. She's happy the flight out was to California was her first flight, and she nailed it. It was cool.
Nice.
Every time we sat in a row, there was a person that sat with us in that row because Claire was only 8 months old, 9 months old, so we held her in our laps the whole time. And every time they'd look over and be like, "She's the best passenger here." She was like sleeping.
So
If she did
good.
pick
Yeah.
up, if she was happy, she was just waving at people, having a good time. So we're pretty blessed. Plus, I'm kind of a gear nut. I like to stock up on like functional gear, like you were saying about the the SPF shirts. Like,
Hmm.
if it's not functional for me, I don't need it in my life. Especially with a kid, you never have hands to do anything because you're always doing stuff with the kid. So like, if it doesn't have backpack straps, like it's out. So
Right. Right.
it's
Exactly.
fun loading up on all the gear. If anyone's got questions out there about baby gear, you hit me up because I've got
There
a
you
pretty
go. Yeah.
like if I can make it from the car to the beach with all my stuff, all Claire's stuff, in one visit,
Right. One
you're doing
trip.
pretty
Yeah.
good. One trip. It's
Okay.
key.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna drive
From
an hour and a half to get to the beach, I'm only taking one trip. I'm not going back to the
right.
car.
That's so funny.
Yeah,
From
kids are great.
like nailing like crazy tricks on the beach as a skimmer to optimizing your path there and minimizing the number of trips. It's great. Yeah.
That's always been the key trip. I'm guessing you never been to the LBI shootout.
The, uh.
We stopped running the Long Beach Island skim
Oh.
contest. We stopped in like 2007, 2008, I think was the last year that we ran it. But to anyone who ever skims Barnegat Light, which is one of my favorite beaches in the world, it's a hike. I mean, it feels like it's like 3 miles through the dunes. So these rolling hills with little tree bungalows underneath. Like all you see is the lighthouse, and then it looks like the beaches of some faraway place in Europe. Like it's such a trip. You're not taking 2 trips to the car in Barnegat Light. I'll just put it like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
I recommend
minimum,
going.
absolute like minimalist.
Yeah,
Living.
towel.
Yeah.
That's it. You're not even bringing water. It's too heavy.
Wow. That's wild. Um. Awesome, man. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for explaining that to me. It's so interesting, like getting people's insight into how their life and skimboarding sort of mesh, and just sort of like just witnessing like Paolo and his kids, and
Yeah.
how he has his kids are now like part of that super grom generation, and they have that sort of like level of skill at that age is so unreal. But to see his like just like even when he has like a twisted ankle, he's still stoked to go to the beach now because he has kids. So it's so wholesome. It's so great, but I love it. And yeah, so anyway.
When I was younger, when you're like in high school and early 20s, I'm not rushing out to have conversations with parents. Like I'm distracted. I want to go run around. I want to skim. I want to have fun. But it's been one of the most rewarding parts of like what I do as an announcer and getting to know some of these skim families because yeah, you're right. As you get older and you start a family of your own, I'm like it makes me think about my dad and growing up and going to the beach with him at 10 years old and him frothing at the beach like a kid being like, dude, that's Morgan Just, or like whatever. It just all that energy comes full circle and it's really cool and I'm grateful that I get to have. I'll message with parents now and they're like, hey, thanks for saying those nice things you know about one of my kids and it was really cool. It means a lot to him and I'm like, listen, this is one of my greatest. This is one of the greatest things in my life to be able to share this with you guys and you guys are an inspiration to me because it brings back warm fuzzy feelings about what I experienced as a kid. So we don't get to do the things that we love to do without the support of the next generation and the kids,
Mm.
people that drive them to the beach, the people that buy them these boards. These 10-year-old kids aren't buying their own boards. Lazy groms. Just kidding.
They
It
just
takes mom and
broke.
dad.
Yeah.
It takes mom and dad, and a lot of times the mom and dad they're not riding, they're just supporting their kids. Like thank you to all the moms and dads out there, to all the skim dads out there. Thank you for all that you do and bringing us to the beach and getting us hooked and then giving us ice cream after.
I love it. I love it. So tell us, where do you see skimboarding in the community within the next decade? How do you see it
Ooh,
changing?
good question. That's a very good question because it's we're going through these incremental progressions and everything's trending in the right direction. And like I said, I feel like skimboarding's never been in a better place. It's hard to predict how, like no one saw social media coming and now all of our videos have been condensed down to 60 seconds and they're all like in portrait mode. I kind of miss the Skim movie. I missed Skim mags. I miss looking at stills. If anyone's out there and has any opportunity to put together a magazine or even just like an e-mag, whatever, like I'd love to see it. There's a market out there for it. I promise you. If even if it's just me, I'll do my best to send out copies to everybody. Um, but I'd really love to see this international presence that we were talking about start to gain some traction. And I love what's happening in Europe. Those guys are kind of taking it on themselves to create their own league, and I think that's really empowering. And I'd love to see more of that footage. So if you guys can hear me, like start getting some footage spread over here to the United States through different mediums. If you got people who are going to share it, like I know the UST shares it on their Instagram, it's a great start. I want to see more of it. Keep it coming. Same thing with the guys down in Australia, and hopefully we get more and more riders globally because there's obviously talent. Like we talked about before, it's all over the top 10 of the UST. There's a lot of global talent. I want to see more riders. I also hope to see more um, like amateur specific events and more pro specific events. Not that I don't love a pro am. I love the pro am. I think it's the backbone of our sport, and being able to go to the beach and like cross paths with some of your favorite riders is an invaluable like event for these young kids. But I think for a lot of the kids, it's nice to be able to steal the spotlight a little bit and not just be like one of the best riders in your division. If it's amateur only, you're the best riders there. Like you are now the spotlight, and I think that's great for sponsors and for the people who are involved, the spectators, to say these are the best 13 to 15-year-old riders in the world. They're all here. Come check them out, see what they got. And at the same time for the pros, I think there's a lot more that goes into it when it's your livelihood. If there's $15,000, $20,000 pro purses, and these guys are trying to go out, guys and girls are trying to go out and win some of that money, and you got to go to a different country to do it, then you should be getting the attention that you deserved and have the live feed there and have some of the sponsored support. And there's a lot of things that are easier to do when you only have 36 riders there. There's a reason why a lot of the professional board sports like the WSL, they limit the enrollments. It's not an open division necessarily. It's like the top 24 in the world, that's who gets the invite. And I think taking it to that place adds a little bit of a finer spotlight on those riders too. And you have to earn your place. Like, you got to earn your place to get in. And if there's an injury or someone can't make it, then you call up the next wild card who's in line. And I would love to see a couple pro specific events and a couple amateur specific events around the world so that these riders can, showcase their skills a little, in a tidier package, let's say. I know a lot of pros have
Sure.
talked for a long time about, oh, we'd love to have like a week long or 2 week long event window so we can
Like a
find the
waiting
best
period.
ways. A waiting period. I think that's very reasonable. But it's tough to do when half of the pro purse is being funded by enrollments from like amateur riders, because it's not like they can take off school for 2 weeks. And it's tough to run a live feed and pay for, permits if you can't have 200 riders show up. So
Right.
they need to be self-sufficient on their own, and that's going to come down to sponsorships, and the sponsorships want to have a clean, easy, targeted, you know um, experience that they can be a part of and support. So I think the cleaner we get with what we're giving the sponsors, the easier it is to want to get someone to jump in and help out.
I see. That makes so much sense, especially when you
Yeah.
think about decoupling the pro and am divisions.
Yeah, and it's not always something where they have to be separated, but you know, if you want someone to come in and sponsor, like I'd love to see a sponsor come in and sponsor a division. Why not? We have the Skim USA is the semi-pro division. It's the best of the best riders from all the different age divisions. That could be sponsored, like we just had Spice Skate come and sponsor the whole tour. They gave a certain number of boards to be given out at each event. They put money into the pro purses. I think that's great. We could advertise an entire division to them. And every time you mention it, just like in the WSL, they have the Jeep leaderboard. If you're talking about the leaderboard, you mention Jeep. They bought that space. Think about it what you will if you think that's selling out, but you know what? Like, they make the tour better by providing them the tools that they need to make the experience better for us. So I don't know. I think it's an exciting sport, and I think a lot of people enjoy watching it. And if that's the case, then we should be sharing it. You know.
Totally, man. Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's so much there, but yeah, I definitely am looking forward to the growth of the sport and um, the international community. Getting more involved in the game, and I love to see what the Euroskim Tour is doing right now, and
Yeah,
I can't wait. And I'm meeting up with some friends to go to the last stop in France. So
that is
hoping to
awesome.
bring you some of those shots, some of those
Oh,
videos and
please
stuff
do.
like that. So yeah,
That's incredible. I
um,
can't wait to see him. I can't wait to see him. And I guess let me say this one last thing too about on that same token. The people that I've been mentioning, the Tex Hayneses and Franks out there, and the guys who run these different contests for 20, 30, 40 years, they're always looking for help. That's just a sad truth. Like, they're a lot of times they're not always volunteers, but a lot of times there's volunteers that help out, setting up scaffolding, take things down. Guys like myself, as much as I love announcing, what I would love to have is a stable of 3 or 4 guys who can jump in and out on the mic.
right, yeah, rotate, yeah.
It would be great. I just think it's nice because it adds a little extra flair and it mixes up the monotony of what you're hearing when you're on the beach. And some people specialize in different aspects of it. Some people are better in a broadcast booth than they are as a master of ceremonies. Some people know the amateur riders a heck of a lot better than they know the pros, and vice versa. So when you have people who feel comfortable, feel confident, moving the event along and bringing their own flair to these events, the more we have in the skim world, the more we can do. So if you're great with a camera and you want to pitch in with the live feed, if you come to one of these events and you want to get cross trained with someone like Clay who can help you out with that, and then you can go back to North Carolina and maybe you can help out with that local contest, like, that helps us. So if you're a kid at home who's interested in doing anything in the broad range of what the skim makes the skim community click, if you want to pitch in and do a little internship or volunteer with us, like you will get reps, you'll learn, you get to do what you love. Like there's a lot of pros to it. So thanks to everyone who's already taken the time, but we could really use the help. So if anybody wants to pitch in, don't worry, there's something we can find for you to do. A lot of it comes with instructions. We say, go ahead and do this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or if
Yeah,
somebody
and
comes up
there's
to you and said like we've never had an event go overtime in 40 years, that'll probably set you right up for
that's
success.
all you do. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That's all right. But at
um
the same time, it's like we've never had anyone do a post write up on Instagram before. You know, there's kids who are out there who are way more skilled at doing things that we never thought we needed, and that ultimately the sport's better off for having. So, guess what? You're pretty handy with a camera. We can find something for you to do. You're pretty good with sharing posts on social media. Guess what? We still need you. It doesn't have to be setting up scaffolding, but we need them too.
right, exactly. Yeah, we need everybody. um so I'm just curious, what are your own personal goals and aspirations within skimboarding now that you don't yeah, like yeah, tell us a little bit about those. And I know your daughter's probably included in that. We already sort of covered some of that stuff, but just tell us like what are your next milestones in your life?
That'll be on her. I'm not gonna force
Right.
her, but I'd like to think that she'll find it pretty fun. She seems to like the scene already. I'd be a very proud skim dad, that's for sure. But we'll see how that goes. I guess I'm feeling pretty fulfilled on that front right now. Um, I've had a lot of friends who, we've kind of become disconnected. I'll say it this way. When I was like 20, there's a big digression with riders at like that age because everyone's trying to like fight to maybe go pro. And then if you realize that that's not your skill set and you're not going to go pro, it kind of leaves you in this limbo where you're like, what am I doing here? And unfortunately, it's at that same time where you start getting jobs and you get different priorities or you start growing families and then you have less and less time to be a part of the sport. And it really made me sad when I was like 20 years old. I knew I wasn't going to go pro. And I'm looking at all my friends who I looked up to who were 25, 26, and I wouldn't see them at the contest anymore. And that was like disheartening to me. I understood it, but it was disheartening to me. And I made a promise to myself that like I wouldn't just drift away and not be present anymore. I wanted to be present. And I'm very fortunate and grateful that I found the avenue that I did to be an announcer because I'm kind of plugged into it now. I probably have more of a role now than I ever did. So it worked out for me. But that's kind of what I'm saying too, to bring us back to that same last point. Is like, if
Hmm.
you've got a little bit of time to give, there's a place that we can find you to use it, and we'll do our best to shine a light on you at some point and show you our gratitude. But, like, I would really love to see people like between our ages, between your and I ages, who were like really in the scene, for their own reasons, whatever that might be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and everyone has their own reasons, but I think it just goes to what you were saying is that there's a place for everyone within the skimboarding world. And you don't necessarily, everyone wants to initially, I think, like be the best, but you don't have to be that guy. You don't we can all be the guy in our own sort of ways of, contributing to the sport. So,
Yeah. I guess too, when I was a little bit younger, I had a couple friends who had businesses that were skim related, right? Whether it was like East Coast Skimboards, the Skim Shop, or the people at Skim Shop, or different like pad manufacturers like Let's Party Traction, And I would see kids at the beach who were like 15, 16 years old. I'm like, dude, you are good. Let me make a phone call to some friends who might maybe want to get a tape or see what you've got to see. Maybe they'll sponsor you. I don't know. Just like use your connections. Maybe it doesn't pan
mm,
out, but like if you have friends in the industry, even if it's this is what I'd really like to see is so many of our sponsors are like skimboard related. Whether it's Hank Sauce, which is like a hot sauce company in South Jersey that has been sponsoring the Seabright Skim Bash for like 7 years. Go get that Hank Sauce sponsorship, man. Like they obviously like it. They think it's cool. And who cares? It's a sick sticker to toss on your board. If they support you, that's all that matters. Like I just have fans. That's all. Like I've got fans. And that's a cool place to be. So if you fall into that category where like you're in your mid 20s and 30s and you're trying to figure out where your fit is, well, like keep an eye on the talent behind you, because there's probably some kids who'd be pretty excited and stoked to hear you say like, "Hey man, nice ride," or "Dang man, like you're really on a tear lately. Like, can I film for you or something, or can I make a call?" Someone. That's how I got my first sponsorship.
Right.
Some skimmer who I didn't even know saw me on the beach one day and was like, "Dude, this kid's ripping. I need to go get Mary Miller, who ran the Surf Shack, to come down here and watch." And then she approached me and gave me a sponsorship. I was like, "Wow, I didn't even have to make a tape or anything. Someone just sent you
Right.
down.
Exactly.
Cool,
Yeah.
you know." So, create an
Yeah.
avenue for a kid.
Sure. Pass it along. Yeah.
Pass it along. Do
Um.
what Trey's doing. Go start a podcast.
Right. Yeah. Just do something. Yeah. I like the stories. That's my sort of niche, and I noticed that I'll take hours to make a sweet edit in my mind, and then people are more engaged by like shorts, but mostly I think the interviews, I think, and people like those stories. So I just want to say like thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And just going back to what our points were before, there's different avenues in skimboarding world, and I think the avenue that you found has been so impactful. I think when I first met you, I don't know if it exactly is the right event, but I think a couple years ago at the Vic, or was it Oktoberfest? I think I just came up to you and I was just like, "You're like the greatest skimboarding MC I've ever seen in my life." Like, it was just like the energy that you give to the crowd. It just adds to the sport. So I definitely want to appreciate you for that.
Well, listen, Trey. I mean, respect where it's due, man. This is really cool. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for the compliments. And like I said, I didn't think when I got asked to be an announcer that it would be something that I connected with so innately. But like, this is an incredible platform. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me a place to tell some stories. Because I don't do enough talking, I guess. But like,
Right, exactly. Well, that's why I got
I
you on.
yeah, I'm looking forward to all your episodes, man. This is really exciting stuff. You're a great talent, and I'm happy to have you in a place where we can get some cool conversations going, because the stories are the best part, like you said. Go get some stories.
For sure, man. All right, Brett. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you for coming on the podcast, and I just want to give the audience a chance to know where to find you on the internet. If you have a business or service that you want to give a shout out for, shout outs in general. Brett, take it away.
Sure, yeah. I mean, let me start by saying again, thanks to everybody over at Skim USA. Like, you run the best contest in the world. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Everybody over at the UST, and anybody who's ever welcomed me onto a couch or picked me up from the airport. Like, you guys are the best. Like, this is the greatest vacation a 37-year-old could ever go on skim trips. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for mom and dad to take me down the beach all the time. If you want to see the shenanigans I'm getting into, skim related or otherwise, check me out on Instagram. It's Superman949. My last name, Mahon. So Super Mahon 949. On Insta, that's probably where you'll see me the best. And yeah, send me some DMs with some really cool clips, man. Especially if you're like outside of the country. Like, I want to see some of those cool skim clips, Flatland or otherwise.
All right, Brett Mahon, everyone.